The turkey was dry, the wine too sweet, and the silence thicker than anything on the table. I stood in the kitchen scraping stuffing into the trash. The dishwasher hummed behind me like it was trying to fill the space no one dared to. Above me, the fluorescent light flickered, a small reminder that things had been neglected for a while. Across the kitchen, my brother Brad Brooks leaned against the fridge with a beer in one hand, smirk already forming. He'd always worn that expression like a badge right before saying something that would draw blood without leaving a mark. So I said, keeping my voice even, Mom and Dad signed the house over to you. That true, I didn't mean it as a confrontation. I meant it as a question. I was the oldest. I was the one who drove Mom to her chemo last spring. The one who sat with Dad after his stroke. No one told me. I just wanted to understand why. Brad took a swig and gave me that look. Why do you care? Linda, you were never around. You were always too good for this place. Asheville, your nursing job, your important life. He said it like I'd betrayed something sacred by leaving. I was working, I said, but I was here when it counted. He shrugged. Flying in once or twice a year doesn't count. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands. I just think if we're talking about family property, maybe we all should have been part of that conversation. That's when it happened. Brad's body moved fast one second, I was by the counter the next. My back slammed into the fridge. I gasped. Then his knee came up, hard, square into my face. I saw white, then stars, then nothing but a wet ringing in my ears. My knees buckled, blood filled my mouth. My hand reached out blindly for something, anything to hold onto. No one had moved from the living room. Not yet. I dragged myself toward the phone on the wall. My vision swam, one eye swelling shut already, the other blinking against the sting of blood. My hand trembled as I found the buttons. I hit 9, then 1. The receiver was yanked from my grip so hard it cracked against the floor. "Stop it," my mother said. Elaine Brooks' apron, still tied at the waist, stood over me like I'd just knocked over a vase. "It's just a scratch," she said sharply. "You always turn things into a scene." I blinked up at her. One eye wouldn't open at all. The other saw her face without emotion. She wasn't horrified, not even surprised, just annoyed. From the living room, I heard the muted voice of the football announcer, second and goal. Donald Brooks. My father sat slouched in his recliner, still holding the remote, still not looking up. "There goes the drama queen again," he muttered. Blood dripped from my chin to my shirt. No one moved. Not Elaine, not Donald, not Brad. And then I saw it near the baseboard. My bracelet, the leather one I wore every shift in the ER. A patient gave it to me after I stayed through the night holding her hand while she died. It had snapped during the scuffle, now lying in a smear of blood. Useless. No one noticed. I bent down, picked it up. Something in me shifted quiet like a door closing. Then I walked to the front door and stepped out. No one followed. By the time I parked in front of my apartment, the bruising had settled into a deep, swollen purple. Makeup helped, but not much. Concealer couldn't hide the shape of a kneecap. I slipped into the ER through the staff entrance, keeping my head down. Badge clipped to my coat, mouth closed. I didn't want questions. I just needed to survive the shift. In the staff bathroom, I pressed a cold paper towel to my cheek, not because it worked, but because I needed something to do with my hands. The mirror was honest. My lip had split, swelling faintly. The bone around my eye was tender skin, dark like a shadow I couldn't wash off. A knock startled me. Linda Kayla, one of the newer nurses barely out of school, stood outside holding a cup. I opened the door. She looked at my face, then away. "Sorry, I thought you might want coffee." I took it. "Thanks." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. It wasn't curiosity, it was concern. We walked to the break room. Jorge, a trauma nurse, glanced up, nodded once. That silent kind of check-in men do when they don't know how to say, "Are you okay?" I sat alone near the lockers during my break and finally checked my phone. No missed calls, no voicemails. Just one message from my sister Melissa. "Don't stir up drama. You know how Brad gets. Just let it go. 5 words, that's all." But they pressed heavier on my chest than Brad's knee ever did. I didn't know what I expected from her. Maybe not this. The bruises weren't new. Not really. At 9, Brad had locked me in the backyard shed for taking the last Pop-Tart. I screamed, kicked the door, begged. I remember the smell of fertilizer, the rake teeth pressed against my calf, the dim light through the slats. When Mom finally let me out, she didn't ask what happened, just told me to apologize for being difficult. At 8, he shoved me into the linen closet because I was humming while he did homework. I hit the shelf going down, tore my elbow open on the hinge. I remember the light under the door. A pause. Elaine's shoes stopped right outside, then kept walking. She didn't even knock. Back then, I didn't have words like abuse or gaslighting. I thought maybe I really was dramatic, that I remembered things wrong, that I made them worse. But sitting on the floor of the break room that night, fingers absently tracing the ridge of swelling on my cheek, I felt it settle in me like a stone. This wasn't new, and it wasn't going to stop. That's when I took a pen from my bag and pulled a prescription pad from the stack. I wrote the date, then the words frontal trauma. Domestic, non-accidental. I paused, then underlined non-accidental, slowly, twice. That night I started a new notebook. I titled it What They Did. Page 1, Thanksgiving. Page 2, The Shed. Page 3, The Closet. Page 4, The birthday they skipped but told people I was traveling. Some memories hurt too much to hold, but if I didn't write them down, I feared I'd start making them softer. They didn't deserve soft. A week later, I stopped by the house to drop off groceries. Just the usual oat milk for Mom, low-sodium soup for Dad. No one said thank you. No one asked how work was. Elaine was arranging pine-scented candles on the mantel. Donald stared at the TV muted golf playing across his glasses. Brad wasn't there. That was the only relief. I'm going to check the attic, I said. Think I left one of my old blankets up there. No one looked up. The attic was exactly as I remembered, musty, full of boxes no one had opened since the Clinton administration. I coughed as I moved past crates of old linens and a broken fan. Then I saw it. A box labeled in Elaine's handwriting. Family 1989, 2001. I sat on the floor and opened it. Photos spilled out. Brad at the zoo. Brad at his science fair. Brad in his baseball uniform. There were entire albums devoted to his childhood, one for each grade. I kept flipping, page after page, every birthday cake, every Christmas stocking, every Easter basket, his name, his face, his grin. But not me, not a single photo. Then, halfway through one page with a torn edge, the plastic sleeve still had the imprint of a removed photo, and beneath it scribbled in faded pen, Linda's Day No image, just the ghost of one. My hands shook. I dug deeper, found a photo ripped jagged through the middle, a cake with pink frosting, half a balloon, the curl of handwriting that looked like mine, and a tiny edge of a blue sweater I remembered wearing on my 9th birthday. I didn't speak. I just stared. Someone had gone through these books and removed me. Not forgotten. Erased. I put the box back where I found it. No blanket in my hands, just dust on my fingers. And that torn sliver of birthday sitting in my pocket like a crime scene. Back home, I spread everything out on the kitchen table, old injury photos, scribbled dates, copies of medical visit notes, that half-torn birthday picture I'd folded flat again. I taped each one onto the wall, one by one. Not for drama, for documentation. I called it the case against silence. And still part of me wondered if I was being too much, if I was stacking stories that didn't belong together, if maybe Melissa was right. That's when the phone rang. Rachel McKinley. We hadn't spoken in years. She grew up next door, used to trade lunches with me in 2nd grade. Her voice hadn't changed. Linda, she said I didn't know if I should call, but it's about Sophie, her niece, 8 years old, staying with Elaine for the week while Rachel's sister was overseas. She told me something today, Rachel continued. Said Uncle Brad got mad, said she was being loud and he pushed her. Not hard, but enough. My grip tightened on the phone. Rachel's voice broke. Then she said, "He told me not to be a drama queen like Linda." I stared at the wall, the photos, the notes, the dates. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It wasn't personal. It was a pattern. And it had started again, just a smaller target this time. Rachel was still talking, asking what she should do. I didn't answer right away. I was looking at a note I'd written the night I got home from the hospital at 23. It wasn't bad enough to matter, except now it did, because it wasn't just about me anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Sophie's voice in my head. He told me not to be a drama queen like Linda. The words stung not because they were new, but because they weren't. They'd simply been passed down like a family heirloom no one asked for. I sat in the dark, staring at the wall I'd covered in evidence. Each page fluttered faintly in the breeze from the cracked window. The room smelled like printer ink and something older like grief that had settled in the carpet. I opened my laptop. There, in an old backup folder I didn't even remember naming, was a series of images from over a decade ago. Me in my early 20s, standing in the bathroom mirror, bruised collarbone, split lip, a purpling eye barely open. I had forgotten I'd taken them. Back then, I must have needed proof. But somewhere along the way, I buried it. Hid the photos, maybe thinking if I couldn't see them, they weren't real. Now they stared back like witnesses I'd once silenced. I started dragging files into a folder. Then, I opened a new document and titled it Project Witness. Every detail went in. Not just what they did, but what they said after. What I was wearing. What I said back. What I didn't. And what I knew now, that if I stayed silent, Sophie would learn the same lessons I did. How to fold pain into politeness. How to bleed quietly. I couldn't let that happen. Not again. The envelope was cream-colored and thick. No return address. Just my name handwritten in tight, careful print. I opened it over the sink crumbs from dry toast still on the counter. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Signed at the bottom, Miss Florence Greer, my 8th grade music teacher. I hadn't thought of her in years, but the second I saw her name, I remembered the day I flinched when Brad slammed a locker shut. She had looked at me gently for a beat too long. She wrote, "Linda, I saw the bruises back then. I filed a report with the school counselor. Your parents came in furious. There were threats, lawyers, defamation. The counselor backed off. I stayed quiet. I've regretted that ever since. I kept my journal from those years. The report, too. If you ever need it, it's yours. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't making it up. I believed you then. I believe you now." My hands trembled, but not from anger, from relief. For the first time, someone outside the family had said it, written it down, confirmed that what I remembered wasn't some twisted version of events. It was real. I called her that afternoon. Her voice was softer than I recalled, older but steady. "I'm sorry I didn't do more," she said. "People like your mother count on silence, yours and everyone else's." I looked at the wall in front of me, the notes, the pictures, the photo Rachel had texted of Sophie, her lips swollen and her eyes not meeting the camera. "They won't get that silence anymore," I said. "Not from me." Elaine called the next week. Her voice was light, almost sweet. "We're having dinner Sunday, just family. Brad and Heather will be there. You should come." I hesitated. Then I said yes. I baked a peach pie, Elaine's favorite, and bought a bouquet of pale yellow tulips, the kind she used to keep on the windowsill when I was little before she stopped noticing small things. When I arrived, the table was already set. Candles, cloth napkins, wine glasses turned just so. Brad sat at the head arm around Heather, who smiled like she'd been rehearsed. Elaine took the pie, nodded once. "Smells fine," she said. We sat. The turkey was warm, the rolls slightly burnt. Brad launched into a story one I hadn't heard in years. "Remember when Linda locked herself in the closet because I took her crayons?" He laughed. "You were such a mess back then. Everyone laughed with him." I didn't. "It was the other way around," I said quietly. "You locked me in." Brad grinned. "You're still holding on to that." I looked down at my lap, one hand on the napkin, the other near the teapot. Elaine sighed. "Can we not ruin dinner for once?" And then the teapot tipped. Scalding water poured into my lap. I gasped, pushing back my chair, the heat biting through my jeans. Elaine didn't move. Brad blinked, then chuckled. "Careful where you sit." I stood slowly. My legs burned. My eyes didn't. Elaine began slicing pie. "That's your fault," she said. "You were sitting too close." I looked around the table. No apology, no acknowledgement, no surprise. They just kept eating. The fork scraped the plate, the candle flickered, and I understood. This wasn't a dinner, it was a reminder. They still thought I was bluffing. That night I made a list, 2 columns. On the left, people who stayed silent. On the right, people who helped the hurting. The first was longer, but the second mattered more. Sophie's name was at the top. I thought about her little voice repeating words that once carved into me like glass. I thought about the quiet way she held her hands in her lap like she was trying not to take up too much space. Then I thought about Miss Greer's letter, and Rachel's call, and my own bruises layered like rings in a tree. The next morning I baked another pie. Same crust, same filling. I drove to the house. Elaine opened the door, startled. "Didn't expect you." I handed her the pie. She took it without thanks. "I need 10 minutes," I said. In the kitchen they gathered, Donald arms crossed, Brad leaning, Heather silent, Elaine folding a napkin with too much focus. "You have 72 hours, I said. To tell the truth, publicly, about what happened to me, and what's happening to Sophie." Brad scoffed. "You're threatening us now." Elaine stared at me like I was made of smoke. "You think people will believe you over your own family?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. "I don't need belief," I said. "I have documentation. And Sophie." I turned, walked out the front door, left the pie cooling on their counter like a warning. They didn't call. Not after a day. Not after 2. No apology, no denial, nothing. Just that same old wall-thick practice silence. But I wasn't idle. I sent a copy of Miss Greer's letter to my attorney. Attached photos, journal scans, medical documentation. I labeled every file, every date. I added the quote from Rachel. And one more. An audio file. Rachel had asked Sophie gently to repeat what she'd heard from Brad. And she had. Clear as glass, her voice said Uncle Brad told me not to be a drama queen like Linda. Then he said if I told anyone he'd take away my kitten. In the background you could hear Elaine's voice clipped and low. Well, if she'd just behaved, none of this would happen. I listened to it twice. The first time I cried. The second time I wrote down every word. I submitted it all. My lawyer Marianne Keating called 2 hours later. "This is more than enough, but be ready, they'll deny everything." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I looked at the empty hallway across from my desk, the folder open on the screen. The audio paused at the word kitten. They still thought I was bluffing, still thought silence was power. They hadn't realized I'd learned from them, but not what they wanted. I hadn't inherited their silence. I had weaponized truth. They agreed to meet in the church rec hall. Neutral ground, no lawyers present. Elaine arrived first, wearing a mauve blouse she used to save for funerals. Donald came next, slow cane tapping on tile. Brad and Heather followed, their faces smooth rehearsed. I was already seated. So was Marianne Keating, my attorney. She wasn't there to argue, just observe. We'd invited one more person. They didn't know yet. The door opened. Miss Greer stepped in. Same silver bun, same calm. She sat beside me. Elaine's mouth pinched. Brad muttered something under his breath. I pressed play. The audio filled the hall, Sophie's voice small but steady. Then Elaine's. No one moved. I handed out copies of Miss Greer's letter. Donald scanned it. Elaine folded hers without reading. Brad refused to take it. Heather stared at the table. Marianne laid down a final paper, a statement of temporary protective custody. Sophie would remain with Rachel until further notice. CPS was already involved. The school had been notified. Elaine opened her mouth, closed it again. Then Miss Greer stood. She placed something on the table between us. A china teacup, white with a blue rim. It was mine. From years ago. She looked at Elaine. "You gave this to the thrift store. I bought it back." Elaine scoffed. "It's just a cup." Miss Greer didn't flinch. "No. It's what she held onto when no one else held her." No one spoke. The room felt strangely still, like a curtain had dropped. A scene over. No applause. Brad looked at me then, not angry, just confused. Like he couldn't understand how the story didn't end the way he expected. I stood, took the teacup, slid it gently into my bag, then walked out. The apartment was quiet when I got home. I set the teacup on the windowsill beside a pot of basil that hadn't quite given up. Light touched the rim just right. It glowed faintly like it remembered what hands had once held it. I made tea. No music. No news. Just the kettle, the mug, the chair. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. It was Rachel with Sophie curled behind her legs, her backpack sagged on one shoulder. A plush kitten peeked from the zipper. Rachel looked tired, but grateful. She wanted to bring something. Sophie stepped forward. In her hand was a folded piece of paper. She didn't speak. Just gave it to me, then climbed onto the couch without waiting for permission. I unfolded the note. It was a drawing, me and Sophie side by side, each holding a teacup. Hers was pink, mine blue. We were both smiling. In shaky pencil beneath, she'd written "safe now." I sat across from her tea cooling between us. She looked up at me, really looked, and I saw it. Recognition, not just of me, of herself in me. I didn't say much that night, didn't need to. Before bed, I added one line to the top of my journal. Silence isn't my legacy. 3 weeks later, the papers came through. Rachel was granted full guardianship of Sophie. The court issued a no-contact order against Brad effective immediately. Supervised visitation only with a state-appointed monitor. Elaine and Donald were included in the restriction pending evaluation. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't make the news. Just signatures, timestamps, initials, and neat corners of documents that now held weight like anchors. Marianne called me that afternoon. "You did it," she said. I wasn't sure what that meant exactly. I hadn't fixed anything. But the bleeding had stopped. That night, I packed a small box. Inside, printed copies of everything: photos, letters, audio transcripts, a thumb drive with every file labeled and dated. I mailed it to a P.O. box I'd opened in Sophie's name. No one had to see it now. But one day she might want to. One day she might need to remember what was survived for her. And who didn't look away. At dinner, I poured tea for both of us. Sophie had found a matching cup at the thrift store plastic, but with the same blue band. She lifted it to her mouth with both hands. "You think they're still mad?" she asked. I smiled slow. "Doesn't matter." And it didn't. Not anymore. Spring came late that year. The trees outside my window stayed bare into April, as if unsure whether the cold had really passed. Sophie liked to sit by the window in the mornings. She'd draw hum under her breath and occasionally glance up to see if the tulips in the pot had bloomed yet. One morning I placed something beside her notebook. She looked down. A new teacup, porcelain blue-rimmed, just like mine. No cracks, no chips. She traced the edge with her finger. "Is it for me?" I nodded. "You don't have to drink from the broken ones anymore." She didn't say anything, just pulled it close gently like it was something alive. Across from her, I set my own. The old one Miss Greer had saved, still intact, still standing. 2 teacups, side by side. I poured us both chamomile. The light caught in her cup like a quiet promise. She leaned her chin on her hand, studying me. "Do you think they'll ever say sorry I didn't answer right away? Because some questions don't need answers. Some answers don't matter." I reached for my cup, the rim warm against my palm. Sophie lifted hers too. We drank in silence. The window behind her was full of green.